Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Ishtapada Paramhamsa Regacharya Stotra Shata Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. It's okay. I mean, maybe it's not happening, so it's fine. Yeah, I have a pen drive. It's in my bag, laptop bag. Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayed Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Ruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 18, chapter entitled The Residents of Jambudvipa Offer Prayers, text number 33. Yasmin asankyeya visheshanama Rupa kritau kavibhif kalpiteyam Sankhya tattvadrisha paniyate Tasmai namah sankhya nidarshanayate iti Yasmin asankheya visheshanama Rupa kritau kavibhif kalpiteyam Sankhya tattvadrisha paniyate Tasmai namah sankhya nidarshanayate iti Yasmin asankheya visheshanama Rupa kritau kavibhif kalpiteyam Sankhya tattvadrisha paniyate Tasmai Namah Sankhya Nidarshanayate iti. Sankhya Visheshanama. Sankhya Tattva-Trishapaniyate. Tasmai Namah Sankhya Nidarshanayate. Yasmin Sankhya Visheshanama. Akrito Kabibhi Kalpiteyam. Mataji's. Yasmin Sankhya Visheshanama. Yaya Tattva-Trishapaniyate. Yasmin, in you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Asankhya, innumerable, Vishesha, particular, Nama, names, Rupa, forms, Akritav, possessing bodily features, Kavibihi, by great learned persons, Kalpita, imagined, Iyam, this, Sankhya, number, Yaya, by whom, Tattva, of the truth, Drisha, by knowledge, Apaniyate, is extracted, Tasmai, unto him, Namaha, respectful obeisances, Sankhya Nidarshanaya, who is the revealer of this numerical knowledge, Te, unto you, Iti, thus. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. O my Lord, your name, form and bodily features are expanded in countless forms. No one can determine exactly how many forms exist. Yet you yourself, in your incarnation as the learned scholar Kapiladev, have analyzed the cosmic manifestation as containing 24 elements. Therefore, if one is interested in Sankhya philosophy, by which one can enumerate the different truths, he must hear it from you. Unfortunately, non-devotees simply count the different elements and remain ignorant of your actual form. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. Philosophers and scientists have been trying to study the entire cosmic situation and have been theorizing and calculating in different ways for millions and millions of years. However, the speculative research work of a so-called scientist or philosopher is always interrupted when he dies, and the laws of nature go on without regard for his work. For billions of years, changes have taken place in the material creation until at last the whole universe is dissolved and remains in an unmanifested state. Constant change and destruction, bhutva bhutva praliyate, is perpetually going on in nature. Yet the material scientists want to study natural laws without knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the background of nature. As Krishna stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:10, Maya dakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetuna nena kaunteya jagadvi parivartate. This material nature is working under my direction of son of Kunti and is producing all moving and unmoving beings. By its rule, its manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. Now the material creation is manifest. Eventually it will be annihilated and remain for many millions of years in a dormant state. And finally it will again be created. This is the law of nature. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Sapatantikam वंदेहम श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो ओं विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामिने गौरतिशे नमः हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिंधुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा नेक्स्ट ओके थैंक यू सो हरे कृष्णा सो वेलकम एवरीवन फॉर today morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. The verse under discussion, this 5:18:33 text, the translation and the purport, Srila Prabhupada is talking about, the translation is talking about the 24 elements and the creation process, and in the purport Srila Prabhupada talks about how scientists and philosophers who try to speculate can never arrive at this particular knowledge by themselves. So this is the theme under discussion. So that's what we would do. Okay, well, slides are pretty bad, but anyway, let's please tolerate that. Actually, there are just some photographs I have used from this Subodhini book. So that's all that is there. Right. So, okay, to begin. So, since, this Kapila Dev has been spoken of in this particular text, we are referring to a discussion from the 3rd canto, chapter 26, where Kapila Dev elaborates this entire process. Okay, and a beautiful example is given in the Bhagavatam. Of course, this comes in the 2nd canto because the creation is explained in the 2nd canto also, I think 5th chapter, and 3rd canto, 26th chapter. So in the 2nd canto, the example is given of a spider. It's a beautiful example. I mean, if you just think about it, right? The spider which is there, if you see, it creates the web from its own mouth, right? The ingredients of the web come from the mouth of the spider only, and the web is created, and in that web, the spider never gets caught, right? Only the other entities are caught. And when all the tamasha is over, the spider withdraws everything back into its mouth. Okay, so this is the example that's given always for the Lord's creation process. It's a beautiful example. You can't have a better one. The reason being, there is what we call as the Upadan Karan and Nimitta Karan. Upadan Karan means ingredients. Who is the cause of the ingredients? And Nimitta Karan means who is the cause of the construction. Like a builder makes a building, he is not the Upadan Karan of the building because he has got all that material from here and there, right? He is only the Nimitta Karan, he is only making the building. But the Upadan Karan is existing in Prakriti. Right? That's why we have that Prabhupada story talking to that fellow who was selling glass, saying that, you are stealing because you are taking the sand and you are making whatever you want and you are selling it. So he said, I give donation. He said, okay, you are a small thief, no problem. So the point is that nobody in this creation we are not Upadan Karan, we are only Nimitta Karan. Right? Like for example, parents give birth to a child. So the parents are the Nimitta Karan, right? But the Upadan Karan, this body itself is Brahmavastu. It is coming from the Supreme Lord's Upadan. It's part of his. It's like the clay from which the potter makes the pot, but the potter has not manufactured the clay himself. So the spider's example is simply amazing. It's a Vedantic, it's a beautiful example. Because the spider is the Upadan Karan, he's producing it from his own mouth, right? And then he's the Nimitta Karan also, he's laying the whole web. And he's not even getting caught in it, like Krishna says in Gita, Namam Karma Nilimpati, I am not caught up in all this, right? And when the whole thing is over, he withdraws also. So exactly, it just fits in brilliantly. Okay, so sometimes it is said, that in nature, just by looking at all these animals and all that, one gets so much of knowledge about, what is what, right? About Vedantic knowledge. We see that in the Bhagavatam also, the 24 gurus, everything, it's all related to nature and Prakriti. So as once hearing this point, somebody was saying that, what about a dog's tail? So let's, take the example of a tail of a dog. How could that teach us something? Because apparently if you see, like if you compare the tail of a cow and the tail of a dog, the tail of a cow seems to have a lot of purpose. It moves 360 degrees. It drives away all the flies and mosquitoes and everything. Constantly the cow is, moving its tail. And also it covers its private parts also. So there is a privacy also element that is there, which the cow's tail accomplishes. But if you see the dog's tail, it is standing in a very awkward position. Neither it is able to drive the flies away, nor it is covering its, private parts which are always exposed, right? So both are not getting served. So what is the purpose of it? So one devotee was explaining this nicely. So he said that, see, it is like this. The Brahmana sadhana which is there, it could be like the tail of the cow or the tail of the dog. Okay? As in, if the sadhana of the Brahmana is good, he's doing it properly, then his sadhana becomes the tail of a cow. It drives away the sinful reactions, like the flies being driven by the cow's tail, and it also helps him prevent fall to adharma. So the back portion is considered adharma. So that is getting covered up. So the adharma, he's protected from adharma, basically, because of his powerful penance and austerities and sadhana and everything. On the other hand, if the Brahmana sadhana is not very good, it is very weak, it is like the tail of the dog, because it's neither able to drive away his sinful reactions. And you see the dog, all the flies are there, he's just, trying to move his mouth behind to drive them out, because the tail is of no use. And at the same time, adharma is also completely, there's no protection from that also. So just by seeing that, so you can understand that. So so just by looking at this thing in nature, you can understand, how am I doing basically? Am I like this or that? Okay, so anyway, let's come back to creation. So we came back because of the spider. So it's like, from the spider's example, so the point is that just by observing Prakriti, we can learn so many things, right? We can just learn so many things from Prakriti. Okay. And coming back to dissolution, the Lord winding up everything and all that. So there was this poetry that I had come across some time ago by one Vaishnava poet. So he writes that on the night of Brahma, we all know, right, that Mahavishnu puts all the conditioned souls to sleep. Everyone is sleeping. So for that, the example is given of a mother who has several naughty children. Okay, so you can imagine that there is a mother who has half a dozen children, and whole day, and these children are active, and they are doing a lot of commotion and tamasha and everything. So at some point of the time, the mother gets really fed up. So what she does is she makes all the children sleep. Sab so jao abhi, bas, sab band, because then there is shanti, right? But when the children go to sleep, now this is something that only mothers can understand, that when children go to sleep, they look very sweet. It's a fact actually. That means a sleeping baby looks very sweet. Only when he gets up and shows his form, then there is problem. But jab tak so raha hai, they look very sweet and innocent. And especially for the mother, the sleeping child looks all the more sweet. Okay. So the children go to sleep and they are looking so innocent. After some time, the mother feels compassion actually on these children. She feels that I should wake them up and engage them in play and many activities that they want to do, because it's not their nature to keep sleeping like this. So similarly, this poet says that Mahavishnu is like that. During the Brahma's day, all the living entities are trying so many things, this, that. Finally, by the end, he says, chalo sab so jao abhi, thoda, But then all the conditioned souls go to sleep. Then he looks at them and he feels that I think I should awaken them and engage them again in activity. Let us see, let us give them another chance to reform and do something good. So he again awakens all the conditioned souls, and there is another opportunity in terms of creation to experience something with that. Okay, so these are analogies which are there to help us. So basically, just by looking at Prakriti, by looking at common life, we get so many Vedantic, right, ideas and everything. Another thing in the purport that Srila Prabhupada talks about is about how you can never understand the Supreme Lord by philosophical speculation and empiric understanding. So this is again a very important point. Okay, so if you see carefully, the only way we can understand the Lord is by Shabda Praman. So that's why among the three Pramanas, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Shabda, I'll not talk so much about the first two, maybe we'll talk about it some other time, but it is said that Pratyaksha is useful to understand Prakriti. To understand Prakriti, Pratyaksha is fine. Okay. To understand Atma, Anumana is okay. You can, because by common sense and logic also you can understand Atma. right? But to understand the Lord, you need Shabda only. Okay? So that's why the Vedanta Sutra has this aphorism, Shastra Yonitvat. Shastra Yonitvat means it is only from the Shastra Yoni that this knowledge of the Supreme Lord awakens. Otherwise, by speculation, we can never come. So for example, the Nyaya Shastra, which is there now in opposition to Vedanta, the Nyaya tries to describe the Lord by Anumana. And some way that's what we try to do in our DY's first session also, if you carefully see, right? We try to explain the Lord primarily by Anumana Praman, correct? But if you see carefully, there is a slight thing in it. It's actually Nyaya, it's Nyaya Shastra, it's bona fide, but it is kind of obviously inferior to the Vedantic understanding. Because the Vedantic understanding is, you cannot understand the Lord by this logic. The reason is that the creation is in some sense also so beautifully orchestrated, it doesn't seem as if it needs a creator. As in, see, that's the beauty of an original creator, right? He has not made it in such a way that he needs to keep meddling in it always. It's in an auto mode, doing well. So that is why by logic one cannot understand. But from Shastra only we can understand the Supreme Lord. That's why Shastra Yonitvat. So we have all these sayings actually in the Mahabharata also, that you cannot understand by logical conjuncture is not useful to understand the absolute truth, who can be understood only by Shabda. And Jiva Goswami in his Tattva Sandarbha gives a very interesting analogy also for this. He says that just like, if you say that the Lord created this whole universe, if somebody hears this, one will feel that he has become tired. Because generally speaking, when somebody creates something, you feel very tired at the end of the creation process, right? I mean, just cook some bhoga or something, you feel tired at the end of it. So this is Anumana. By Anumana we understand that when you do some work, you feel tired. But the Shabda says that no, he is not tired because he is creating by his own desires only. He doesn't feel tired at all, even though he has created. Okay, so this is in stark contrast to the Abrahamic description of God, where they say that God created the world in 6 days and on Sunday he rested. That's why they give Sunday holiday. No, seriously, I mean, that's their philosophy, that 6 days he created the world and the 7th day he goes to rest. That's why they have this philosophy. Then the Sunday they go to the church. Of course, for the Muslims it may be Friday, but whatever. Their whole idea is this: in 6 days, the Abrahamic model is the 6 days he creates and 7th day goes to rest because of the tiredness. But in Vedantic model, there is no rest only. It's going on and all. So he is just created by his own desire and he is... Okay, so this example is given in Tattva Sandarbha to make this point that by logic and Anumana, one can never understand the Lord. One can understand only by Shabda and only by that particular thing. Okay, so what we will do in the next half an hour, we'll try to go a little bit into, some things about some technical details. I've just used some simple charts. Just go next, please. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just be there. So these are the 24 elements. So we will go a little bit into it. And then maybe we'll conclude the talk today by trying to see some lessons from this. Okay. So of course, this model is something that perhaps all of us know from the second and the third canto. If we have read second canto, I think it's chapter 5, and third canto, chapter 26, that talk about this creation model. So the whole idea is that everything begins from this unmanifested state of matter that is called as Pradhan. Right? Where there is no differentiation. So Pradhan is that entity where there is no differentiation. And the Mahat Tattva is considered something where ego, Ahankar, starts getting added. Okay? And when Ahankar is added, under the influence, the modes are also there. So under the influence of Sattvagun, what happens? What is created? Rajogun, what is created? Tamogun, what is created? Right? This is how our Bhagavatam describes the whole creation process. And it is, as such, if you see also, it's very simple to remember and understand. Correct? If you see this Mahat Tattva under the influence of the mode of goodness, what it basically produces is the mind and the 10 sense devatas. Okay, so I'm just reading it out first and then we will explain a little bit about it in a way that everybody can remember. Okay, so Mahat Tattva along with this Ahankar produces the, what we call as the Karta, the doer. The doer, which is Adi Deva, that is the mind and the 10 sense devatas. I'll just explain this in a simple way. Then with passion, it produces the Kriya, the cause, that is Prana, the 10 senses intelligence. And with Tamoguna, it produces Dravya, or the 5 Tanmatras and the 5 elements. Okay. So the simple way to understand this, to remember these 24 elements is that under the mode of goodness, what is there if you carefully see is the 10 sense devatas. The reason is that they are actually considered the doers. Okay. So we will be elaborating this particular theme because the Bhagavatam talks about this particular model where the sense, okay, the sense object and the sense devata are all created at the same time in the beginning. Okay. And there is an invisible connection among them, which is made at the beginning itself. And that connection is always there. Okay. And we will be looking at this also. I have quoted one quantum physics theorem called as Bell's theorem, that it basically says that once initially things are connected, and even later if that connection is not perceived, it always remains the same. So we will see that. I have quoted that. Maybe that slide will come soon. Okay, so anyway, we'll come to that. But the point is that the devatas are considered the doer. Okay, and we see that in the Bhagavatam prayers also. Like in 10th canto, that beautiful prayer is there of Brahmaji, where he's telling the Lord that when you come to this world and you are enjoying nice pastimes with the residents of Vrindavan, we, the principal demigods, are able to relish your nectar through the senses of all the Vrajavasis. He says that. Okay, because each of the Vrajavasi, when they are seeing the Lord, when they are hearing, when they are smelling, tasting, touching, moving towards Him, running towards Him, embracing Him, all these acts which are done by the senses, by the ordinary people in the world, Brahmaji is indicating that the demigods who are in charge of those particular senses are perceiving that same thing with the Lord. So he's saying that it's such a great fortune when you come to this world, because your devotees experience you through their senses, and as the devatas, we are able to feel that same experience through them. Okay, so from this particular, so this is how we understand that, yes. And also the sense devatas are considered in the mode of goodness because they are considered the maintainer. Okay, so we all know this, right? That maintenance is basically the maintenance is done in the platform of sattva. Okay, so the sense devatas, and the mind is also considered the mode of goodness. So that's why, if you see, the mind, only when it is very serene and calm, it goes to its original nature, and then only a person can be very comfortable, right? Unlike intelligence, if you see intelligence, that has been shown in the mode of passion. Just the previous one only, now the next one. Okay, the intelligence, if you see, that is shown under passion, intelligence and senses. Why are intelligence and the 10 senses? The right, knowledge acquiring and the working senses. Why are they shown under the mode of passion? Because they are always scheming, right? They are always scheming and planning how to do something. So that's why that's considered passion. And the gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and the 5 sense objects, the tanmatras, they are considered tamoguna. One more thing we understand in this Bhagavad model is that the more and more ahankar is added, the more and more grosser things become. Okay, so with sattva-guna, it's more subtle there at the level of that sense devata, and even if you see in Rajoguna, the senses are also little subtle only, if you carefully see. We will explore that. The senses. So the eyes means not just these eyes, right? So they are the internal eye that we are talking about. We will see that, how the Bhagavatam describes it. So that is also subtle. But at the grossest level, it becomes like actual objects in the world. Okay, so the whole idea is that more and more ahankar is added, the manifestations in the material world are more and more gross in nature. Okay, so that is how it is. So we can remember it very simply, right? The doer is the devata, the karana is the senses, and the karya, the effect, is on the dravya. Okay, so there is adi deva, adhyatma, adi bhuta. So this adi bhuta in the Bhagavatam always refers to the gross entities. This is not that adi bhautik lesh that we are talking. Okay, bhauta means this, bhauta means the physical things in this world. Okay. And also the Vedantic understanding is, if you have a problem at that level, you need to address it at that level. Okay, so I'll not talk much about that, but simple example, like Arjun, the problem that he had before Bhagavad Gita was an adi bhautik problem, as in he was not having the land to rule. Okay, so the solution was to fight and get it. Otherwise, there is no solution to it, right? So you need to get your land back. So the war was inevitable, right? So these are some side lessons also from this. Let's go next. Okay, so the point is, so each of these senses have these devatas, right? Next. We will explore this also in next. And of course, this is the whole, the tamasic, from the tamas, the 5 bhuta and the 5 tanmatras that they're coming, this is the order that the Bhagavad describes, right? This is the order that it describes. And so basically, like from earth, there is air, then there is fire, water, earth. And in the middle, there is touch, form, taste, smell. So an example given in Vedanta is about, is like, suppose there is milk that is getting transformed into curd. Okay, so we all know this, right? So at night, you set the milk. Next morning, there is curd. So let's assume milk is like ether in this example, curd is air. That is a transformation. But if you come in the middle of the night, nobody will come, but if you come in the middle of the night and see, what will be there in the pot is neither milk nor curd. It is an intermediate stage. And that intermediate stage is considered the tanmatra. Okay, so this is an analogy that's given in the Vedantic study, where right, one element transforms to the other, and in the middle, there is this intermediate stage, which are the tanmatras. Anyway, move ahead. Okay, so this is how the Bhagavatam describes these things. Yeah, now this is interesting, right? So basically, again, this is again a simple chart that is basically talking about each of these senses, right? So each of the senses, if you see carefully, like if you take the eyes, okay, there is chakshu is the subtle sense, right? So generally, if you see our shastras address subtle senses only. Like simple example, we say, Aaj Bhagavad class mein sau shrotra gan aaye, correct? We don't say sau karna aaye. You know, karna means the external ear. The shrotra means the internal ear. Okay. So we generally say like that, no? Shrotragan, we say like that. So that is the internal sense. Or like Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, Shrotram, Chakshus, Parshanam, cha Rasanam, Granam, Evacha. All that is the internal sense that is being addressed. Okay, so there is this internal sense, and there is the external sense, which is like Akshini. Okay, Chakshu and Akshini. So there is the internal sense and the external sense. Now this is something, you know, that so like Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu in one of his books, he talks about this. He quotes another book, which is called as NDE for the blind. Okay, so he writes that there is a book called Near-Death Experience of the Blind People. So it seems there are congenetically blind. Congenetically I mean matlab paidashi blind, right? People who have experienced near-death experience. That means they have felt out of their body and they have seen themselves for the first time. Because in their real life, though, they were blind only, right? So they never saw anything. But only during that NDE, when they were out, they saw. And they came back and they reported. So there is a book only written about it called Near-Death Experience of the Blind. So the question now is, who saw that? Okay, now because this fellow, though, he has never seen anything all his life. So the idea is that the subtle sense chakshu exists, right? And so we understand that because we have the Bhagavad model with us. So we understand that when this fellow has gone out, as in, you know, the subtle body has gone out, the chakshu is there. That is a subtle sense. Okay. So this external sense is not, so that's why the scriptures don't talk so much about the external sense. It's all about subtle. Like even if you see Upadeshamrit, right? It is saying Vacho Vegam Manasa Krodha, Jihva Vegam Udaro Pasta Vegam. That Upasta and all that, if you see, it is a subtle sense. That external organ is called a Shishna. You know, so there's a different terminology for it, right? So the whole point is that entire sense control, mind control, all that we talk is at the level of subtle senses, because it is the subtle senses which are actually in motion and, you know, kind of trying to, like in the Puranjan story also, if we read in the 4th canto, all that is about those subtle senses only description. That this fellow Puranjan went to that place, saw that and came back, you know, so all that description is about the subtle sense. It's something, in one way, it's easy to understand also by Anumana, but at the same time, because from a scientific perspective, they don't accept the subtle body, subtle senses, they find it very difficult to understand, even though they have a lot of evidences. Okay, so I'll just quote one more evidence before we go ahead, which our scientist friends have. They call this the phenomena of phantom limbs, if you have heard this, right? So what's a phantom limb? Phantom limb means what they say is, suppose somebody's arm is cut, amputated hand, not only human being, they have tried it on cats, monkeys, everything. So if some creature's arm is cut, they experience a missing hand. So for example, they have done experiments where a cat has lost one of its leg, but with that missing leg, the cat tries to push. Okay, now in the Bhagavad model, if you come, you will understand that the hands and legs, there is hasta pada, this is external, but there is that subtle sense of grasping also. That name is not given here, but there is the subtle sense of grasping. So somebody loses the hand, they lose the physical hand, but that sense of grasping they don't lose.
So with that sense of grasping, they try to take something. So there is a treatment also for it. So what they do is they say that, there is a signal from the brain that is going there. They do something actually, to ensure that he doesn't feel that. But naturally they feel. So that's called as phantom limb, which is experienced by anybody who has lost some part of his body. He feels that missing part. Now this is very, we don't feel two missing four hands, right? Maybe somebody who is in a complete Vishnu Duta mood may feel that, but generally normal human beings, we are happy with just two hands, but we don't feel that, teesra chauta haath missing hai. Of course, it would have been there, some people would feel that japa would have been easier, but anyway, I'll leave that point for another day. Okay. So, the two hands, so the hand, so the phantom limb. So, the very interesting phenomena if you think about it. So, all that gets resolved in this Bhagavad model if we think about it carefully, right? Right? So the subtle senses are spoken of in such great detail. Okay. And the whole idea is, next. Please go next. Yeah. So basically, now another thing from the Bhagavad model we understand, which comes in Srila Prabhupada's purports also, if you read the 3rd canto Kapila section, that the gross sense and the subtle sense and the Devata, there is some connection between all of them. Now somebody may say, I don't accept the Devata and all that. Okay, you may not accept the presence of the actual Devata, but the effect of that is always going to be there. We'll give some example. Prabhupada gives these examples in the 3rd canto, chapter 26 purports. For example, we see the veins. The veins are there. Veins in our body. The rakta is considered subtle here. And the rivers, now that's the more important point, the rivers, the deities presiding over the rivers are the Devata in charge of veins. So Prabhupada says that in Ayurvedic science, there is a treatment that if you have problem in your veins, you have to take bath in river. And similarly, abdomen, udara, that is the gross sense. Feeling of hunger and thirst is subtle. You can't explain that. And ocean, Samudra Devata is the lord of that. So Prabhupada again there he writes that if somebody is having that hunger, not proper digestion, then ocean bath is considered very good. Now somebody may say any kind, even swimming pool bath may help increase hunger. That's not like that. That is general exercise. But here there is a very specific thing. So what we understand is that when we say Devata, it is not just, so that physical Devata is there only, right? The Devata there is a Devata, but that Devata is also manifest in certain physical ways in this world. Like so many things. If you take something else also, if you see for example heart, Hridayam is the gross organ, Hridayam. The mind is the subtle, which is connected to that. We all show, all the lovers and all show the heart only for showing their love. Why? Because the mind is the subtle sense which is linked up to the physical heart. Okay, so when they show the heart and that love symbol, nobody is referring to this physical heart, right? They are referring to the mind. And we all know this, that if you have pain in relationships, etc., somebody has pain in their relationship, there is a pain in the heart also. Right? When somebody says something and we feel very bad about it, kahan dard hota hai? Humko yahin par dard hota hai na? We just say, oh Prabhuji, he said something, I felt so bad. Okay, so obviously he didn't attack your heart with a hammer or something. What he has basically done is he said something where your mind has got affected. Right? And the connection of that is what? Chandra. Chandrama manaso jata, as the Purusha Sukta says. So the Chandra is the lord of that. And this is again physically verifiable. So I'll just make this point. There was one scientist, a very famous author, his name is Charles Kovacs, a Westerner. He has written books for children, which I was using to teach my sons. So he describes a lot about the Western idea of the moon. I was really surprised, the kind of statistics and facts he gives. So I'll just quote one or two things from that. He says that observation has proved this fact. He says that on the full moon day, artists and musicians have maximum outpour of their talent. It seems all these artistic people and musicians and all, right, who come up with creative ideas, it seems maximum of such creative ideas they will get on the full moon night. Right? And he also mentions this point. At this point, we also know, of course, that the moon is also connected to people who are crazy, right? We call them lunatic. Right? So it's affect. So that means the Chandra is the Devata, but Chandra is also this physical moon which is there, right? So there is a connection. There is that invisible connection. Okay? There is an invisible connection. And like that, everything if you see. Skin problem, herbs. We all know that somebody has itching and so many problems of the skin. There are herbs for that generally. Or if you see, for example, NASA, the smell and everything that's related to Vayu, ice chakshini is related to the sun. So So everything like that. I mean, we could keep going on and on. Next. The point is that there is this connection. And this is what I was saying about this Bell's theorem. It's a quantum physics law that says that once connected, objects affect one another forever, no matter where they are. Once connected, they affect one another no matter where they are. So if you go to the Bhagavad model of creation, what is happening? This gross sense, the subtle sense, and the Devata, that connection is made when? At the time of creation. And at least as per Mr. Bell, once that is there, it is there. Following the Bell's theorem, an invisible stream of energy will always connect any two objects that have been connected in any way in the past. Okay, so what I'm saying is that these fellows have also come up with such theorems, but they may have not had examples for this, but we have a nice example from the Srimad Bhagavatam that, which is in line with this quantum physics theorem, right? So the idea here, so this is some, even a practical application from that. Let's go ahead next. Okay, now what we will do is now, just next. We'll just quickly try to, next one more. Yeah, we'll just see some basic lessons which I want to talk about from this and then conclude our talk today. So first thing I want to say is, in the Bhagavad model, everything starts with ahankar. If you carefully see, matlab wo pradhan se jo mahat tattva aaya, pradhan is that undifferentiated matter. Then in that mahat tattva, what is added is basically this time and ahankar, right? So time and ahankar, false ego. And under the false ego, under the influence of the three modes, goodness, passion, ignorance, create all those things, right? The mind, sense devatas, the 10 senses, intelligence, and the 5 gross objects and the 5 tanmatras, correct? So everything starts with ahankar only. Okay, so that is why that is the last covering to go also. Okay, and the last manifestation is the senses, at least from our perspective. The gross senses which are there, that is the last thing that is manifest. Okay, so if you see how to, so one thing first. Okay, so I'll just make this point before I come to this. Okay, metaphysical explanation of creation. So why does the Bhagavatam explain everything so metaphysically? The reason it is said it explains it like this, because the goal of the Bhagavad is to teach us how to get out of this universe, in a way. That is why the creation is also explained like that. Our scientist friends would never come to such an explanation because their goal is to manipulate the matter, not to get out of that. Okay, so this particular model which is there in Bhagavatam, it is a reality which is explained in a way because of the underlying psyche of the Bhagavatam, which is to help you get out. And to help you get out, everything is explained. Like for example, among all the things that are created, which is the first thing that is created among the physical objects? Sound. Right? So that is why anavriti shabdat. From sound only, all this gross matter has come up, and from sound only you get out also. Okay, that's one example. Similarly, another example is how this ego itself is a switch. This ahankar itself is a switch. As in, more and more ahankar added, more and more gross your existence becomes. Lesser and lesser ahankar involved, you go on the subtle level, or you escape from the attachment to that gross matter. Correct? That's why if you see the universal creation also, the topmost planet would be Brahmaloka, which is completely subtle, and as you go down in the Bilaswarga is extremely gross. Okay, so the whole idea is that more and more ahankar is getting added, more and more gross things are becoming, and the lesser and lesser. So in this explanation is the clue of getting out also. That is why the explanation is like this, correct? The explanation is like this because it is helping us understand how do you get out. And in so many ways, it's all connected, right? Like we see in the Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says, Tasmatyam indriyanyado aniyamya bharatarshava. Krishna is saying, first you have to regulate the senses. Because the senses, if you see again, 3.41, senses are the final creation as far as we are concerned. So that's the start. That's like, that's where you start. But ultimately, nirahankaraha, what we call as humility, and right? So one will have to come to that. Otherwise, one will remain attached to matter. So all these things we understand, correct? And another thing we understand, so this is actually mentioned by Bhaktividyapurna Maharaj. I've taken it from his talk. He basically, so I don't remember the reference, I think he gave, but I didn't recall it. He basically says that the material worlds which are there are a reflection of the spiritual world in the Karana Samudra. It's a 3D reflection, he says. Like there is a 2D reflection, there is a 3D reflection. So he says the material universes are all a reflection of the spiritual worlds in the Karana Samudra. So it's a 3D reflection. But in human beings or in people, when ahankar is added, then it becomes perverted reflection. So there's a difference between reflection and perverted reflection. So reflection means, reflection. Perversion means when that ahankar is added, like we know, right? When ahankar is added, all kinds of perversions come up. Correct? So the point from that, what we understand is that if ahankar is removed, then even these material worlds which are there, which are Krishna's energy, seem for that devotee non-different from spiritual existence. Correct? So that's why we see a pure devotee who is there in the material world and interacting with the material objects, who is free from ahankar. For him, that perversion has gone completely. Correct? So he is able to see this energy as directly the Lord's energy also. Okay. Another thing that we understand in this whole thing about the way Bhagavat explains the creation model is that this comes in the third canto, in that 26th chapter. If you read that text 71, it's a beautiful chapter. It basically says that the Virat Purusha was created, all the devatas tried to enter it one by one and awaken it. But the Purusha did not awaken. Finally, in that text 71, it says that when the Lord of the Chitta, Chitta is the, like we know, right? In the 24 elements, Chitta is the 24th, correct? There are 5 gross, 5 tanmatras, 5 working senses, 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 20 ho gaya. 4 mein there is the mind, intelligence, ahankar, and there is chitta. Okay, so the Lord of the Chitta, when he enters, the Lord of the Chitta is the Paramatma, when he enters, then only the Virat Purusha awakens. So from this we also understand this world is such that the Paramatma is actually, he is actually enabling in so many ways everything to function. Matta smriti jnanam apohanam meant, right? I mean, if you remember that DD series, Devamrit Prabhu's lectures, which he had given long back, he talks about this, that in the morning, 9 o'clock, the Paramatma wakes you up and say, hey, come on, you need to go to office now, so please get up and, be ready immediately to go. So the Lord of the Chitta, when he enters, only things actually get awakened. Okay, so that's another point. Okay. The final thing which I wish to say is I don't think I will go into that. Next, I'll just conclude with something else. Yeah. This is what we will actually conclude with. So this is again, so many groups of 3 are explained in the Bhagavatam. If you see carefully now, all these 3. So what are these 3s? Okay, so we will end with this as the last slide. Right? So the Satchidananda, we know this, right? So from Satchidananda there is Sandhini, Samvit and Hladini. Okay, so this again are a set of 3 which are connected to the first. The Sandhini of the spiritual world manifests as Dravya in the material world. Dravya means objects. Objects exist, right? For objects, the only thing that are there is existential reality. That is why it is coming from Sandhini. Kriya is done with knowledge, so that is coming from Samvit, and Jnana is related to Hladini. Okay, so you see this Dravya, Kriya, Jnana. So the point what I have done here is I have put all these sets of 3 and they are all connected to each other if you think about it carefully. Right? Karyatvam, Karanatvam, Kartrutvam. That is the effect. The effect is the Dravya. The instrument is the Kriya, the senses. And the doer, is related to the Jnana. Okay? And the effect is Tamas. The instrument is Rajas, passion. And the doer is Sattva. The effect is dull because it is Tamas, Rajas, active. Sattva is related to dull, active, serene. And ultimately it is related to paraphernalia. All the Dravya is related to paraphernalia, where Kriya is related to endeavor and senses. Kartrutvam is related to knowledge. The last point is where we want to end. This is again from the understanding of the Bhagavad, where we understand how one can, get out of this whole thing. So that means not next, previous only. To escape, to solve this, hearing about Krishna is basically addressing the Jnana level, the Jnana thing. That is how it is. Using objects in the service of Krishna is basically relating the Dravya, and using senses in the service of the Lord is related to Kriya. So basically the idea is that these are the 3 ways in general we all connect to the Absolute, right? Either we use objects in the service of Krishna, or we use our senses in service of Krishna, or like a Bhagavatam class, we hear about Krishna. And these 3 are again connected to these 3, Dravya, Kriya, Jnana. Okay? And in some sense, if you see, using objects in service of Krishna is relatively the easiest. Like donation dena is great, but relatively it is the easiest to give a Dravya. Whereas using senses, so that is coming under the Kriya, Chit Shakti, so that is little more difficult. But still that is also possible. If you see in the Gita also, using senses in the service of Krishna, anybody can be engaged in some service activity. But sitting and hearing, that is very difficult, because that's the most difficult among them in some ways. So that is related to the jnana, aspect of it. So all these things are again all related in some ways. Obviously, I think I tried to cover too many things and I made a mess of my own class. But anyway, I think we will end over here. There were some other things, but we will not talk about that today. Right? So I'll just conclude by saying that this particular verse spoke about the 24 elements which Kapila Dev has spoken in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about how you can never understand the absolute truth by philosophical speculation. So our class we spoke about, since this was the topic, we took up the model of creation. We gave the example of the spider, how it creates, right? Then we also spoke about how the Lord is understood only Shastra Yonitvat. You cannot understand him by any other way. Then we went into the 24 elements, right? We saw this whole creation model metaphysically explained, beautifully explained. It has so many connections if you see carefully, right? What is produced from Sattva, what is produced from Rajas, what is produced from Tamas. The sense devatas and mind, intelligence and the 10 sense organs and the 5 gross, 5 subtle elements are coming from Tamas, right? And then we saw how this sense, the internal sense, we discussed about that, how our Shastras are all talking about internal senses only. They are not talking external senses because that is the thing that is to be controlled. Even if my eyes are gone, my internal, the chakshu is there. Akshini may have gone, but chakshu is still sitting inside. And I put some other eye, then I am only seeing because my chakshu is only active. And we saw scientific evidences for it, like NDE for the blind or the phenomena of phantom limbs, how it actually is all talking about this, but they don't come to that conclusion because they have not accepted this model only. Right? Then we saw some lessons and we saw how all these 3 things are connected. And because they are connected, there is so many things at physical level also we saw, like the moon, like the samudra, like all these things, right? So you're connected with that nature, Prakriti, right? And then finally we also saw how the Bhagavat is describing all this with the purpose of helping us understand how to engage in service of Krishna ultimately and how to get out of the world. That is why this description is like this. It could have been obviously described in some other, but the Bhagavatam has chosen a description which helps us understand how to get out, and we saw so many reasons for that. Okay, of course, this is a very, very detailed matter, and certainly it's not a topic, which is for 45 minutes, but I just thought that since this was the purport under discussion, we would talk about it briefly for some time. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hare Hare.